Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. And let's dive right in. Tom, thank you for joining us today. Tom Duff and myself, Brian Farrar from Pure Storage. And Tom is one of our principal architects, and I really appreciate your time today. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, Tom, is your exciting background in what you used to do, and then how it aligns to what you do today at Pure. And I don't want to spoil your thunder, but let's talk about your previous position at a major financial institution.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for having me. I appreciate the invitation and the
Thank you.
opportunity to have a conversation here. Yeah, I've been with Pure a little over a year and a half now. But prior to my joining the organization, I had a 30 plus year career, all in IT in financial services.
That's when you
Um,
started in elementary school, I'm sure.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, so I think it's noteworthy to share that I did grow up as an application developer. And why I think that's material to the conversation is throughout my career, I've always had, this huge value and passion for how technology can drive the strategic intent of any given business. And I may not have been the best developer, in these organizations, but where I really sort of provided a lot of value was, partnering with the business and being able to articulate to them, oh, these are your objectives, and here's how technology, well placed at the right time, can really drive value. So for me, that's what it's all about. I grew up an application guy, but over the course of time, held a number of executive levels at, both in property and casualty insurance and in banking. And then the most recent, before joining Pure, was I was the head of infrastructure services at a large super regional bank on the East Coast. And it was in that capacity I came to meet Pure.
Hmm.
The bank had some pretty aggressive growth objectives. We, as an executive team, realized that we needed to think about information technology and how it was positioned in a different way. And I actually, as part of a large digital transformation, data and storage refresh program, became the executive sponsor for a large Pure Evergreen One deal. So differentiated technology with Pure, innovative characteristics and feature set of the consumption-based subscription model became extremely beneficial for that organization and how it drove strategic benefit.
Interesting. So, what are some of the problems you guys were facing at your financial institution?
Yeah, the things that we really wanted to achieve, or they wanted to achieve, were, given their history, quickly they were owned by a much larger global bank. Over the course of time, that relationship resulted in an underinvestment in the technology stack. So
Mm.
there was a tremendous amount of technical debt, both in the infrastructure services as well as the application stack. So their desire to grow aggressively, not only through product and market expansion, but through acquisition, was challenged based on the fact that there was such a heavyweight burden of risk in their portfolio in technical debt. So, in order to achieve those growth expectations, they had a lot of work to do on cleaning up their environments.
Yeah, funny. I hear a lot of these sorts of stories, and mergers and acquisitions are one of the most common things that happens in industry, and that almost certainly never means your IT is perfectly aligned,
Yeah.
and it always means some level of disruption and rejiggering. So, and you mentioned the tech debt that also causes. Let's talk about that concept a little bit.
Sure.
What really is tech debt? What is the downside of it? And what should we look for in understanding what's causing tech debt?
Yeah, let me just sort of give it from my viewpoint,
Yeah.
both being on the application side and on the infrastructure side. I like to sort of break it down and decompose it in that technology stack area. I think it's good to organize your thinking around that. So, within infrastructure services, typically organizations and customers, acquire assets, right? Whether it's servers or storage arrays or a mainframe, et cetera. And when I think about technical debt in the hardware layer of this technology stack, I think about its age, right? And I know a lot of customers like to, hey, I'm going to make the acquisition. I may depreciate that acquisition per our accounting principles, over the course of 60 months. But, I'm a customer. I'm going to ride that investment as far and as long as I can, right? But the
Hmm.
fact of the matter is, once you hit that 5 year mark and that those assets start to continue to age, the probability of an incident or a failure occurring within that physical asset is on the increase, right?
Of
So if
course.
you're an organization like where I was, that's heavily government regulated, and reputationally we wanted to show up in every digital channel to meet our customers where they wanted to do business, the fear and risk of having a failure or an infrastructure component go down because of age was something you had to balance risk. So the risk posture of a customer always has to be top of mind relative to tech debt and infrastructure. The next
Yeah,
layer, go ahead. I'm sorry.
absolutely. That's been my experience on the application side as well. There's just no appetite for any downtime if you're an end user.
Absolutely. And when you think about our storage competitors, our competitors here at Pure,
Sure.
everyone's faced with, because of the technology, a guaranteed 5 year forklift to a redo, right, all over again. And I think that's from a customer standpoint, that's the worst part of the customer's sort of persona is when you come to the end of that depreciation contract or what
Mhm.
have you, is what happens at the end. So I think Pure does a great job, Evergreen One, at helping navigate those waters.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think we do. And you talked a little bit about the tech debt, and then you introduced Evergreen, which, of course, for our listeners is Pure Storage as a service offer. And how did that get introduced to you at the bank? When did you
Yeah,
start thinking
let
about
me
that
round
stuff?
this off and I'll go through the
Okay,
stacks quickly.
go
After
ahead.
infrastructure, we look at sort of the runtime environment versions, right, if you will, or large application containers that customers may purchase to run their business's most critical workloads. And disciplined customers are thinking about tech debt and currency, about keeping their versions at the current generally available version, GA version, so
Hmm.
N or N minus one, or a version behind. As soon as you start getting a little bit behind that eight ball and getting N minus two, three, and four, again, you have the exposure and risk of potentially having a higher percent probability of a system going down and failure. Even worse, potential risk vulnerabilities around cyber, et cetera. So staying current and secure is always top of mind for people. And then lastly, in the application stack, again, I had mentioned I was as an application person, and this contributes a lot to customers' desire and aspirations to get to the public cloud. And a lot of the applications that run the customer's most critical business workloads have a legacy look and feel to them, and therefore are
Yes.
very monolithic, have been touched by generations of developers. And the actual ability to move those in a lift and shift manner into the cloud and assume that you're going to have a positive experience both operationally and economically has been challenging. And typically, what customers are faced to do in terms of removing technology debt within the application stack is really to refactor or re-architect that application asset, right? So you hear things like buzzwords like microservices, et cetera. At the end of the day, I like to think about removing the separation of concerns of your business rules and data from the application program interface. So if you can have data-driven APIs and microservice those and fully optimize that runtime, then it's probably much more mature and ready where you're going to have a much better experience in the public, in the public cloud arena. But doing so requires investment and requires time. And customers are making commitments that we're going to get to the cloud, not really considering, the consequences of, high performant, low latency databases and or suboptimized source code, and therefore you can run into some problems. So that's technology debt when I think about it. But to getting to why we started to consider Pure. Historically, this was a shop that was doing business with one of our larger competitors. But again, back to the point of what was changing, what were the prevailing winds, or the
Right.
conversation that was happening there that really drove Pure. And I'll share two of them. One is, and I think all customers of shapes and sizes are experiencing this, is that there's this accelerated pace of technology evolution, right? Think about the boom of AI and the use of data analytics and artificial intelligence in making better, more deliberate business decisions. But the accelerated pace of technology change is making it more and more difficult for customers to establish a 3 to 5 year IT plan and then
Mhm.
assume that it's going to be durable for the foreseeable future because technology is changing at rapid pace. So the fact that they're adopting and having to pivot to a different technology weekly, monthly, a model that enables them to do so with flexibility and manage their business in the face of uncertainty is in high demand. So I lead with that because as customers experience that, the adoption of consuming services in a consumption based model and the ability to manage that business in the face of ever changing requirements is high demand. A perfect lead in with Pure and Evergreen One. The second one in prevailing wind that that I experienced was a financial one, and this organization was publicly traded. Cash flow was not much of an issue.
Right.
However, they historically had done a very kind of, I would call it a bit of a delinquent job at leveraging a capital expenditure for every type of IT project and program. So
Well,
imagine, if you
it
will, yeah,
used to be the way we did it. I
yeah,
mean, that was
imagine, if you
no
will,
problem.
Windows 2003 upgrade to the current version. Let's use capital. And at the end of the day, that started to show up on earnings calls with an imbalance, and there was a desire to rebalance the use of capital in operational expenses. So as macroeconomic headwinds change and interest rates were on the rise, and the cost of capital was getting more competitive, and businesses overtures where we're going to invest our capital in driving net new business capability to market. That's all well and good, but how do you keep your systems continuously or always current and secure? Again, the answer to both the operational lack of durability of a 3 to 5 year strategy and
Mhm.
a rebalancing of the IT cost structure led us down the path to the Pure tech stack as well as Evergreen One.
That makes sense. And you were doing this in a challenging time period, as I recall. You and I talked earlier. This was even during COVID that you were
Yeah,
trying to make this
that organization
incredible.
signed a large Evergreen One contract on the 30th of March. 2 weeks earlier, the entire campus went home because of the global pandemic. So there was little time to celebrate because there was a stopwatch where the transition off of the legacy incumbent stack onto Pure Evergreen One, which was significant. It was block file object backup, all in 10 petabytes over 24 months. We had to achieve that with people working remotely for the first time. And I remember the challenges in the first 3 months where we couldn't get a high volume of people connected into VPN on the network to actually work. So we were at a disadvantage there.
Wow, my times have changed. But you were. I would have to say, and maybe my timing's off a little bit, but it seems like your bank would have been an early adopter and thinking about the economic advantages of moving to a subscription model. Can you talk a little bit about the financial trade-offs inside the company with regard to available capital and your IT spend?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If I were just to take you on a little bit of a field trip, if you will, of way organizations would rally in the fourth quarter of a calendar year, end of fiscal, and then have to sort of negotiate and compete and evaluate which projects we were going to do in the upcoming calendar operational, fiscal year. There was high competition for those capital dollars. So you would have to arrive as head of infrastructure services with a really well thought out business case to ask for capital to go do such and such. So, we had those conversations around data and storage currency upgrade transformation. And the way I would have evaluate a full refresh of an infrastructure project, there was not a lot of sex appeal to that. As a matter of fact, one of the evaluating metrics that's used is an internal rate of return. It's basically cost of capital, but you keep the net present value of that investment to zero, which enables you to evaluate IT project number one versus two, three, four, and five, which is going to give you the better return, and therefore you can make a thoughtful decision. And as an infrastructure guy, both I had played a role of a CIO in the past, and now on the infrastructure side, it was really difficult to compete for capital investments with a program that was delivering new business capability in delivering on a positive internal rate of return, right? Double digit positive, where a
Hmm.
storage and data refresh would show up and you were like minus 25. So how do you compete with that? Well, you
Yeah.
have to then have the conversation like we talked about around technical debt. If we don't do this, the risk posture of this organization changes drastically, and therefore you may have the result will be outage time, which transactions can be monetized, and reputational social media uproar if you have a critical incident that takes you out of operation. So there was always that balance. And
Yeah.
that's but the embracing and adoption of thinking about services in a consumption oriented model enabled us to balance that out, not compete for capital. So I
Mm.
became best friends with my CIO business segment peers as I promised a better infrastructure, storage, data capability, and solution, and didn't need to compete for capital that was going to encumber them from going to market with the functionality they wanted. It struck an incredible balance in terms of give and take, and able to do things infrastructure wise in a very innovative way. Pure Evergreen One enabled that.
I think our customers and our listeners who are with us today are probably really interested in hearing that, because I know many of them are going through a similar journey. And you've touched on one of the hardest things, which is the financial justification, especially around something, I'm sorry, and I'm in the infrastructure business, but something boring like infrastructure, which is, of course, not boring when it doesn't work. It's
Yeah,
quite the opposite.
exactly
You
right.
and I were talking earlier. People are quick to jump on social media when things go bad, and for some reason, when your service is not disrupted, no one jumps on to say, "Wow,
Yeah.
these guys are really good."
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll tell you, we had two main driving priorities, and one was protecting the core. Everything you're
yeah,
talking about, you talk about Pure's 6 nines of availability, underpinned with SLAs, so meaningful for customers, right? And this organization was about protecting the core, both from working and working well as being secure. I mean, the biggest fans in the organization of the Pure migration was the CFO for the innovative way of attacking IT cost structure transformation, and the chief information security officer, because by virtue of immutable snapshots with safe mode turned on, it completely, exponentially improve the risk, the actual cyber defense posture of the organization. So, and that happened just by moving to Pure Storage.
and you can't underestimate the value of that, because, as we like to say, on the cybersecurity side or on the data protection side, it's no longer a matter of if you get attacked. It's now everyone's going to get attacked. It's now a
Absolutely.
matter of and how do you respond to those attacks.
Yeah, and good
And the
companies are
safe
just
mode,
positioned not to have to pay that ransom.
and frankly, but you would if you didn't have those protections,
Uh,
like, because you've got to stay in business. Yeah,
Certainly.
absolutely.
Yep.
But you were kind of in the early days of the subscription models, and it was personally probably a pretty risky move for you to go up there and kind of bet on an unknown. Nobody knew that we could deliver like we say we can deliver. This was kind of a bet, and I think probably some of us, the listeners, are going through a similar gut check. Do I go ahead and take that leap? Do I bet my job basically on this?
Yeah, this was a large super regional bank organization in the Northeast, in the backyard of one of our competitors, and they had historically been, leveraging that relationship for on and on and on. And but as the organization started to articulate what its desires of potential aspirations to get to the public cloud, to be able to do technology cost structure transformation, to harden the core, and to be able to consume their data and storage resources where they want, when they want, and be able to control the consumption to cost ratio and only pay for what they use when they use it. Pure continued to evaluate way more favorably than anybody else that was being looked at the time. But yeah, that
And
doesn't
even
come without huge challenges and internal selling. I leveraged the expert capability of the account team that I was working with at Pure. But at the end of the day, my organization wanted to do right by the goals that were being put forward. But to say that the choice of Pure wasn't career limiting or ending for me at this organization, I'm not exaggerating. That's not lip service. What Pure said to me on day one is, your success is our success. And during the course of that 24-month journey, they delivered on all of those promises. But yeah, as I've had opportunity to speak with internal sellers and folks in the partner channel that are working with customers that have done their due diligence, and it's pointing in the Pure direction, Evergreen One direction, and it's like, yeah, I want to do this, but in the 11th hour there's the hiccup of there's uncertainty of, will this work, and uncertainty of the ease of procurement to hit the easy button. I like to reinforce with my own unique experiences, you're not going to get fired by going with Pure. As a matter of fact, there's a greater likelihood that that champion and that customer will be viewed as a change agent and somebody that moved the needle in a very material way. So that's what Pure did from my customer seat.
you hear that, listeners? This is real hero opportunity in your organizations. Definitely on the economic side. And you talked a little bit about the operational side. And I think that is what scares a lot of folks who are mainly experienced on the on prem side, on the data center side.
Yeah,
You feel like you're giving up operational control over this really important asset.
yeah.
And yeah, okay, economically it makes sense, but how do I manage it? How do I control it? How do I let go and trust this thing? So what did Pure do to convince you of that you could do that?
Well, again, if you go back to the earlier remarks around the things that were driving us to think about IT and infrastructure services differently, we were driven to get to a consumption model. It wasn't like Pure, and maybe we were unique, was coming in having to convince us as an organization that consumption based models were a good fit. We sort of were there. It was really about how does Pure, both from the differentiated technology and unique characteristics of Evergreen One, really drive strategic benefit. And that's where we were really honed in on is that combination of the two. I have a slide here, Brian, if you don't mind. I can
Yeah,
pull up. I
I
think
don't.
it would starts to kind of tease out at a high level what I'm trying to convey here.
Yeah, please let's take a look. Absolutely, like butter. Thank you.
Okay. So, look, the cornerstone of what we go to market with is really our differentiated tech. So, the evergreen architecture is really something that I was latched onto. The fact
Mhm.
that I wasn't acquiring a service or an asset that over time depreciated, not only in value, but in capability. And I started to look at Evergreen as, hey, the Evergreen architecture allows us to do changes both to the hardware and software. Well, it was very software driven, but do so in a kind of follow the clock manner, an evergreen manner, when you needed it and at the time you needed it, with zero disruption to the application portfolio. That was enormous. So to think that even though we did the business case over 60 months, I was confident enough and had conviction that the evergreen architecture was really driving a 10-year ROI conversation. So that's the
Wow.
cornerstone, is the tech. If you look to the left, you talk about operations. And when I think about the flexibility and the unique flexible characteristics of Evergreen One, it speaks specifically to the tiers of availability that you customers can place their workloads into. and then the formal SLAs that underpin the service. So that's
Hmm.
operation efficiency at its best. And that enables all types of benefits. Once you see that come to life and Pure overachieves on delivering 6 nines of availability without having to take planned downtime, when it says, hey, your performance of such and such array for these growing arrays may need a performance boost and we need to do a controller upgrade next Thursday evening, and that happens sort of matter of factly without any fanfare, that's a huge capability. And as customers start to rely on that trusted partnership with Pure, they can start to pivot and look at leveraging their internal resources and capabilities in a far more value added way. So, one I call out is, the Pure Evergreen One implementation allowed this organization to terminate a large service contract for storage support with an onshore offshore provider. In lieu of that, hired 5 storage engineers, which was adopted was a site reliability engineering model. So you
Hmm.
replaced a $5 million managed service contract with 5 FTE, and then the migrations are done, and Pure continues to overachieve on their SLAs. You know, we as an organization look to place these individuals and employees now into higher value work. So I'm a storage engineer, and all of a sudden, my net new assignment is to work in an agile development pod with developers. There's this confluence of cross pollination of capability, of expertise in provisioning infrastructure for environments, and then likewise, they're getting trained up in how to become the technologies of automation in developing assets for a hybrid cloud environment. So we
Uh,
got, we got the
it's
best
human capital. Yeah.
we got the best of those resources, and quite honestly, at the end of the year of that transition from a leader, the employee enablement, technology engagement and enablement scores went through the roof because of that pivot. Again, something that was
Yeah.
unforeseen as a benefit was hugely beneficial as a result of this organization's pivot to Pure and Evergreen One. So,
So we
and then,
often,
and the last pillar
go
here
ahead.
is
Last pillar.
commercials, is being able to consume your data and storage resources in a hybrid cloud environment and only pay for what you're using when you need it and for only the duration in which you need it in an on-demand model. That gave us control of the cost consumption, or the consumption to cost ratio, as I like to call it, in having transparency around commercials drove better behavior within that organization. So, just if I were to pivot over, this is a great slide of the 3 pillars of Evergreen One. And then you talk
Mhm.
specifically about, our SLAs that are really backed legally and financially. None of our competitors do this. They scramble.
That's an important. That's an important point, by the way. That the SLA is not a marketing document, and I think we see a lot of them that are.
That's right.
This is a real commitment. This is a contractual document that we sign with the customer.
That's right. Now we will underpin that with financial, or credits back to the customer should we miss an SLA. In my mind, we rarely miss. We're sort of on these issues of meeting the SLA. It's reputational for us, but we do back it legally and financially. Our competitors put language and scramble for language around marketing, but we're the only one that stands behind it. And then lastly,
It,
when you think about the 9 tiers of capability, 5 for unified block and file, and 4 on unified file and object. There's a lot to unpack in this slide, but ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to evaluate the workloads and use cases of the customer, and we are going to be very deliberate in tailoring and placing them in the tier of the tier of service that they need. And it really is based on their desired business outcomes. That's at the end of it. We can tailor this and configure this to meet their business outcomes. And that's the beauty of Pure and Evergreen One.
and we've been doing this for a while. This is not, hey, Mr. Customer, you're going to be a guinea pig for this service, is it? We're one of the oldest, most established storage as a service offers that you can acquire in the industry, I think.
Yeah, well, as a customer in fourth quarter 2019, first quarter 2020, Pure was the only partner, and I call it a partner, not a vendor. It's a partnership. We're selling solutions. We're positioning our portfolio of capability as a solutions provider. So that's what I love about our story. Is less about commodity and more about specialization, and that's how we ought to be double click. That's what we ought to be double clicking on every day of the week. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
That's it's interesting because we often talk about how Evergreen One can effectively reduce the burden on your IT staff and free them up for more innovation. And it sounds like this actually happened for you as a customer. And what I was saying earlier is this is so we always can identify the capital benefits, the actual financial and economic benefits. But here you have unforeseen human capital benefit in which you not only reduce the cost, but you were able to reallocate them to more productive, more competitive activity. I think there's a savings there. I think
Oh, there
on the
absolutely,
human side.
yeah, there absolutely is a savings. As customers and organizations embark on this digital transformation journey, it's
Mhm.
not so much only about the modernization and optimization of assets, infrastructure, and applications alike. It's about the next generation of people, process, and technology. And there's benefits to be had in a very holistic, broad manner. And it was with interesting story to tease out of my experience is, yeah, we could evaluate. Here's the priorities in which we did the evaluation in RFP, but then after the successful migration and steady state started to occur, you could reapply that same lens of priorities. And what fell out was about a dozen aha moments along the 24-month transition migration journey that had we not have Pure and not had a flexible
Mhm.
consumption-based model, there would have been a tremendous amount of fallout through COVID. It gave us huge, tremendous ability to pivot in a very graceful way to, accommodate things that happened in the environment that were unforeseen. Back to my hammering home of the ultimate benefit is really it's the risk management aspect of it. As a customer internal that may own the P&L of infrastructure services, you can now manage your business with confidence in the face of uncertainty. I can't project if I'm acquiring other organizations what I'm going to need for storage in 36, 48, 60 months. So if I have to go ask for capital, the only insurance policy of protecting those concerns is to overbuy, over provision. And typically, if
Right.
it's based
That's the way
on
we used
a flawed forecast, those
to.
assets go unutilized. So don't worry about over committing, over provisioning. Start with Pure and a consumption model and allow that partnership to grow organically. And that's the tagline. I mean, that's the power that we bring to market.
You're so right. In my former life, all of us had these former lives. I was heavily focused on large enterprise applications, ERP, supply chain, so forth. And you're absolutely right about over provisioning. We could not gauge. Well, we knew there was uncertainty. We couldn't gauge how much application growth we were going to have from day one. We double provisioned. That was incredibly expensive. One of the things I think is appealing to me about Evergreen is that flexibility and that real-time scalability. Because as an admin, one thing I'm worried about, especially nowadays in this era of bursting, DevOps and bursting onto the web and the incredible amount of storage and capacity an AI application, for example, can use. How do I protect myself from a capacity standpoint so that, yeah, I don't want to over provision, but I don't want to run out of
That's
capacity
right.
at a critical moment.
That's right. Yeah, and
And
sometimes it takes multiple conversations to really, um, you know, get our customers to appreciate the fact that we're deploying a buffer. We're deploying more infrastructure on the floor, wherever that is, on-prem, co-location facilities, on the edge compute with Equinix, or even through our relationships at, Pure via Cloud Block Store, that we're delivering more capacity that the customer doesn't have to worry about paying for. They're not paying for it. And it stays in lockstep with how they grow, right? And if it's guaranteed that there's some on-demand buffer available, if and when they need it, and they're only going to pay for it when they use it and for the duration in which they use it, that's extremely empowering.
And how do we get ahead of that motion though for the customer so that they don't hit a wall and then say, "Hey, we need more capacity." Yeah, there's a little disruption, but we'll give it to you. I'd like to, how do we get ahead and so there's no disruption, so that we're proactive with the customer?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've been here a year and a half, and one thing I will say is I was a customer for 33 years, but not all customers are created equal. And there's some within their business realms, and what is driving them to make changes will drive them faster to this evergreen one sort of paradigm and dynamics. And there's others that are like, I like I like inventorying my serial numbers. The actual ownership of the asset buoys the value of my business. And, I have a bunch of people that do this, and this is what we do. Um, to that, I say it's a challenge. And I would say, though, that regardless of the customer and, what their dynamics and what they're used to, is that if they're going to be successful in varying degrees of digital transformation, that at some juncture, at point in the line, they're going to have to consider the adoption of consuming their infrastructure capabilities as services. Many of these small businesses or public sectors, is their core their core business is not running a data center or supporting technology, right? It's governmental, it's education, it's small businesses. So to capture hearts and minds is really understanding the three pillars and having the right conversation, not about selling an array, but helping them solve business problems and peeling the layer of the onion back. I may not have answered your question, Brian, but I've been in some of these, working alongside our account executives and SEs, and the sledding can be tough, and customers do what they want to do. Now, we'll always be a great partner and sell them that, but there's a huge value proposition for everyone here. It just may ask or require us to ask, three or four more thought-provoking questions along those lines.
That really makes sense. And I was thinking a little bit about our phone home features and just the fact that you threw out some statistics, and I know it's in the SLA about how many nines of availability we offer, and that's measured not by excluding planned downtime, but that's just in general. And these numbers, they really seem like incredible claims, and that's, I guess, it almost sometimes starts to sound too good to be true. Oh, no more forklift upgrades, and always going to have the capacity I need, and six nines of availability. But our software actually is reporting that, not us. I'm in marketing. I'm not making up these numbers, right? Evergreen tells us this, or Pure One rather reports this information back to us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so,
I mean, again, back to the customer journey, quick story. Everybody across that organization in 2019 and 2020 was shocked that Pure was going to put into the contract in writing six nines of availability. And oh, by the way, my organization owns service management, and we would always have to tease out planned downtime. Nope. Didn't even, that's not a variable in calculating six nines of availability.
mhm.
The more interesting story as the head of infrastructure services and along the 24-month journey is trying to enlist the support of the CIO teams and applications to sign up to move. Now, what I did fairly deliberately was I started to publish the 10 worst performing URLs in the organization. And basically,
Oh,
yeah, wasn't very popular. But at the end of the day, I garnered a lot
as
of
a marketing
attention.
guy, that's
And so when you move a high performant Postgres or SQL database over, and then the application starts to perform 3 to 5 times faster just by changing the storage platform, there was less of a getting the Heisman Trophy treatment. Like, I don't want to be able to sign up, and there was competition to cut line in the queue on the change management calendar to get out in front of it. So that's the
Wow.
performance SLA, and the fact that internally that was the experience there, and it incentivized people to, hey, let's get to Pure sooner rather than later, was something I had never seen in 33 years of playing that role.
Well, it sounds like your experience as a customer is similar to many of our customers. And one of the things I'm very excited about for Pure is the fact that we have a world record net promoter score, which is our customer sat
Yep.
score. And if anybody out there listened to our last couple of earnings announcements, you would have heard that one of the keys to our stock increase and our revenue growth, which has been tremendous, has been the adoption of Evergreen One and how many of our customers really are moving to that subscription model. And the reason I raise that along with our NPS score, which is the most challenging measure of customer satisfaction in the industry, is if we weren't delivering on these SLAs, our net promoter score, our customer scat score would not be a world record. It would tank, and it would tank instantly because nobody waits to express their dissatisfaction.
It's
It's
true. Yep.
instantaneous.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I like to tell everybody, don't believe us. Look at the independently rated customer sat scores and investigate for yourself whether your vendor walks the talk.
Yeah, if you tear back
Yeah.
the calculus and the all of the math that goes into NPS and understand the significance of an 82 plus, that's differentiating. No one, that's unheard of.
Yeah. And that's an incredible score in any industry, not just the tech
That's right.
industry. That's
That's right.
So as we're getting closer and closer to the end of our time here, Tom, if someone is on the fence or they're thinking about investigating an evergreen or subscription model like Evergreen, what would you tell them to do as your next step? How do you get engaged with Pure, and what can Pure do for you as you evaluate the opportunity?
Yeah, I think especially having attended SCO and participated in all the enablement events that I thought were very productive, and watching sort of the evolution of how we're going to go to market with our customers. Yeah, I think it's business outcome driven. You can consume Pure Evergreen One in a hybrid cloud model. Um, the commercials allow you to tailor it in a very optimized way to consume what you want as an infrastructure person. Get infrastructure out of the way, and if I want to consume it here, there, or anywhere, I can do so with an enterprise license, even in the public cloud. Right, our partnerships with AWS and Azure ensure that an enterprise, you can take your license with you and count your reserve in the public cloud providers, and basically take advantage again of the Pure differentiated tech and consume enterprise class storage in the public cloud, which is greatly lacking in the public cloud. Provision, thin
Yeah.
provisioning, data reduction, security for compliance, etc. So, I think we have, as an organization, have starting to improve with practice how to position Evergreen One as a model and capability to truly drive strategic benefit in all classes of customers. Because for us, it started out to be a data and storage refresh, became so much more. It stabilized
Yeah.
environments, it accelerated hybrid cloud adoption, it drove out the IT total cost of ownership significantly, and then improved the risk posture both in the infrastructure and application space, such that it became foundational for everything that organization is still doing today.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Obviously, I think it's pretty clear that the industry, the market in general, is moving much more towards this consumption-based model, an OpEx model, and a subscription model. And it just, as you say, it just really makes sense. We do it for so many other things in life without even thinking about it. Why wouldn't we? I mean, nobody except a tech vendor is in the business of being in
Yeah,
tech,
right.
right? It's a tool for everybody else.
Agree.
You're a retailer, an automaker, or a financial institution.
Agree.
So focus on that line of business.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just a plug for my team and organization, right? We are here
Please.
really to align ourselves both in the internal seller community as well as the partner channel. So, all of my colleagues and peers have their own unique skill set. I just happen to be 33 years in a financial services organization and a customer. But we are here to help drive the adoption and help position Evergreen One in a very meaningful way with our sellers and their partners and customers. So that's how the sales teams and organization ought to view our Wayfinder team, is specifically as not just specialists, but lean in, help ask those questions, understand where the value proposition can really come to life, and help us win. We win a lot, but we can win more, and that's why we're here.
That's wonderful, and I hope everybody listening has learned a little something from your experience today, Tom. Really been fascinating to talk with you today about Evergreen One. Folks, if you need more information, please go to Pure Storage our website, purestorage.com. Evergreen is a top topic on the website. There's a lot of assets for you to download, and we're going to put some links in for you later on. And I also have a public service announcement for us, for those customers listening. If you've gotten an email or a survey on the Gartner peer reviews, we would really appreciate, as a favor to us, if you would fill those out for us and be honest and let Gartner know what you think about your experience with Pure Storage. And hopefully it's as positive as our NPS score shows, right, Tom?
Absolutely. Ryan, thank you
Well,
for the
thank you
invite.
very
I
much.
appreciate the opportunity to
Uh,
talk.
no, I do too. And so I guess that ends our time today. I want to turn it back to our host, Keith, and thank you all for listening.